The house always felt colder at night. It wasn't the weather, it was the silence that followed Eleanor wherever she went. The sound of rain against the windows didn't comfort her anymore. It reminded her of the nights when her husband used to sit beside her, reading quietly while she sipped tea. Those moments were gone now, faded into memories that hurt to remember. 2 years had passed since he died, but the ache stayed quiet and heavy. It's like a forgotten song still playing somewhere in the house. Her son Michael had moved back home after college, promising to help her out for a while. At first, Eleanor had been grateful. She thought his presence would fill the house again with life. But instead, something invisible had grown between them, a distance she couldn't explain. They shared the same kitchen, the same living room, even the same silence, but not the same warmth. Michael loved his mother deeply, but since his father's death, he had seen her differently. She had aged beautifully, with soft lines around her eyes and a calm strength that made her seem untouchable. He respected her, but sometimes he caught himself watching her too long. It wasn't romantic, at least that's what he told himself. It was something more complicated, something he couldn't name. Maybe it was admiration, or maybe it was the loneliness that both of them carried without saying a word. One late evening, thunder rolled softly across the sky. The lights flickered, and Eleanor stood near the window, watching the rain fall like sheets of glass. She wore a long, pale sweater, her hair loose and silver in the dim light. There was something peaceful about her stillness, even in sorrow. Michael walked into the room holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. He hesitated before speaking. "You shouldn't stand so close to the cold window, Mom. You'll catch a chill." She turned slightly, smiling in that gentle way she always did when he worried too much. "I'm fine, Michael. I was just thinking." He handed her a cup. "About Dad." Her smile faded just a little. "Always about him. You don't stop missing someone. You just learn to carry the space they left behind." Michael looked down. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but words felt useless. So he just nodded, watching the rain slide down the glass. "I wish I'd talked to him more," he said quietly. "He used to tell me things I didn't understand. Now I wish I had listened better." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes soft but tired. "You were young, sweetheart. You listened in your own way." For a moment, they both stood there in silence. The storm outside seemed to echo the emotions swirling between them in spoken, heavy, real. Then Eleanor sighed and walked to the couch. "Come sit," she said, patting the space beside her. Michael joined her. They sat close, but not touching. The room smelled faintly of rain and tea leaves. On the table lay an old photo frame, a picture of Eleanor, her late husband, and a young Michael grinning in front of a Christmas tree. She picked it up and brushed her thumb over the glass. "We had such good days," she whispered. Michael watched her face, memorizing the way her eyes softened with memory. "You still have good days ahead," he said. She smiled faintly, though her voice trembled. "Do I?" He wanted to tell her yes. He wanted to promise her she'd be happy again, that she wouldn't have to wake up alone. But the truth was, he didn't know. The only thing he knew was that he couldn't stand seeing her this sad anymore. Something deep inside him wanted to protect her, to make her smile again, even if it meant giving more of himself than he should. That night, after she went to bed, Michael stayed awake on the couch. He stared at the empty teacups, the soft glow of the lamp, and the framed photograph on the table. The more he thought about her, the more his chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't understand. It wasn't love in the way people spoke of it. It was something else. A deep, aching tenderness that came from watching someone fade quietly while pretending to be strong. Upstairs, Eleanor couldn't sleep either. She lay under her blanket, listening to the faint hum of the storm. She thought of Michael, how kind he had been lately, how he took care of things without being asked. She was proud of him, but she also felt something unsettling. The way he looked at her sometimes, as if she was fragile, made her heart beat differently. Maybe it was just loneliness, hers and his, mixing together in the quiet. When she came down early the next morning, she found him asleep on the couch. The blanket had slipped off and the rain had stopped, leaving a thin silver light across the floor. She stood there for a moment, watching him. His hair was messy, his face calm in sleep, and for a fleeting second, she saw not her son, but the man he had become, strong, caring, still searching for something he hadn't found yet. She bent down quietly and placed the blanket back over him. "You remind me so much of him," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. Michael stirred slightly, but didn't wake. She walked to the kitchen, her heart strangely full and heavy at the same time. Later that day, when he awoke, she was already making breakfast. "You fell asleep down here," she said, without looking at him. "Yeah," he replied, rubbing his eyes. "Guess I couldn't stop thinking." "About what?" He hesitated. "About us. About Dad. About how fast everything changes." She nodded slowly. "It does, but some things stay. The love we had never really leaves." Michael looked at her. The morning light through the window caught her face in a way that made her look almost younger. "I'm glad I'm here," he said quietly, "even if it's just for a while." She gave him a small smile. "Me too, Michael." For the rest of the day, they moved around each other carefully, like two people learning how to speak again after years of silence. Small gestures, a shared meal, a short laugh, a simple glance began to rebuild the bond they thought they had lost. Yet, under that growing warmth, both of them felt something they couldn't name. That night, as Eleanor read a book by the fire, Michael sat across from her, pretending to scroll through his phone. But really, he was just watching her, studying every detail. The way the firelight softened her features, the way she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He didn't mean to feel what he felt. It wasn't wrong, but it was dangerous in a quiet, emotional way. It was a longing not for romance, but for connection, for the warmth they had both lost. And when he finally went to bed, he couldn't shake the thought that something had changed forever. The line between comfort and closeness had begun to blur, even if neither of them dared to admit it. In the silence of that night, with only the soft sound of the wind outside, both Eleanor and Michael lay awake, feeling the same unspoken ache, the same longing for something they couldn't define. And though nothing had been said, both of them knew deep down their story had just begun. The weeks after that quiet night were strangely gentle. The rain had passed, but something new hung in the air between Eleanor and Michaela, closeness neither of them could explain. It wasn't love in the way stories describe it, but a deep, quiet need to feel understood. They started spending more time together, not because they planned to, but because it felt easier than being alone. Eleanor began painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Her husband used to say her art could bring warmth to any room. One afternoon, sunlight spilled across the living room floor while she painted a field of wildflowers. Her movements were calm, her face peaceful. Michael walked in from work, stopped at the doorway, and just watched her. He didn't mean to stare, but something about seeing her lost in color made him forget to speak. The smell of paint, the soft sound of her brush, and the stillness of the house felt like a scene from another life. He finally said quietly, "You're really good at that." She looked up, surprised. "Oh, it's nothing serious. It just keeps my mind busy." He smiled, taking a few steps closer. "No, really. It's beautiful. He caught himself, pausing before finishing. "You're very talented." Eleanor noticed the way he hesitated, the way his voice softened before he corrected himself. A part of her wanted to ignore it, pretend it was just kindness, but deep down she felt the shift. For a few seconds, the air seemed heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. She smiled politely. "Thank you, Michael. It means a lot." Then she returned to her painting, hoping the moment would fade, but it didn't. That small exchange left a trace of warmth and unease in both their hearts. Michael didn't understand it fully. He just felt drawn to her presence. After losing his father, he had grown used to seeing Eleanor as strong and untouchable. But lately she seemed human again, soft, vulnerable, quietly beautiful. It confused him. It scared him. That evening, they cooked dinner together. Eleanor chopped vegetables while Michael set the table. The light flickered slightly from the old chandelier above, and the kitchen smelled of herbs and garlic. When she reached up to grab a bowl from the shelf, he instinctively moved behind her to help. Their shoulders brushed, just barely. But it sent an unexpected shiver through him. Got it, he said quickly. Pulling the bowl down, she turned, smiling gently. Thank you. He nodded, stepping back a little too fast. Sure. They continued cooking, pretending nothing happened. Yet every small touch, every shared glance, carried a weight neither of them wanted to name. After dinner, they sat on the porch with cups of tea, listening to crickets. The world outside was calm, but inside both of them there was a storm they didn't talk about. His words were honest, too honest. For a second they both looked at each other, mother and son. Yet something deeper flickered beneath that surface. A longing not of romance, but of two lonely souls trying to find warmth in the same empty house. She stood up suddenly, setting her cup aside. It's getting late. You should rest. He nodded, sensing her unease. Good night, Mom. She paused at the door, her voice softer. Good night, Michael. That night, neither of them slept well. Michael kept thinking about the way she looked under the porch light, the way her voice trembled when she spoke. He wasn't in love with her, he knew that, but something inside him ached to protect her, to take away the sadness that had lived in her eyes for so long. Eleanor, lying in her bed, stared at the ceiling. She wasn't angry or confused, just deeply emotional. She missed her husband, but she also missed being seen, being spoken to, like she mattered. And lately, Michael's kindness reminded her what it felt like to be noticed. The next morning, she avoided his eyes at breakfast. The air was calm but heavy, filled with thoughts left unsaid. Michael tried to talk about work, the weather, anything ordinary, but their smiles felt forced. Later that day, while she was watering the plants outside, Michael came to her with a small wooden box. I fixed the old frame from your wedding photo, he said. It had cracked. She looked at it, touched. You didn't have to do that. Kai wanted to, he said quietly. She took the frame, her fingers brushing his for a moment. Thank you, Michael. He looked at her, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. You deserve to keep those memories safe. That single sentence made her heart ache. Not because of what he said, but because of how much care was in it. She smiled, forcing lightness into her tone. You're too kind. That evening, as the sky turned golden, Eleanor painted again. This time, Michael sat on the couch, watching quietly, pretending to read but stealing glances when she wasn't looking. The brushstrokes, the smell of paint, the way her hair fell softly over her face, it all felt intimate in a quiet, innocent way. When she finally put the brush down, she turned toward him. You've been quiet. Something on your mind? He looked up, startled. Just thinking about. He hesitated. About how strange life is. How close people can be and still feel 1,000 miles apart. Eleanor smiled sadly. Yes, but sometimes distance protects us. Her words hung in the air like a quiet warning, though neither of them said more. She stood, stretching, and said softly, I think I'll turn in early. Michael nodded. Good night. When she left the room, he exhaled deeply, realizing how hard it had become to balance his emotions. He didn't want to hurt her or himself, but he couldn't ignore how deeply connected he felt. Upstairs, Eleanor sat at her dresser, staring at her reflection. She saw a woman who had survived loss, but didn't know how to move forward. She also saw something else, hope, flickering quietly, even if it frightened her. That night, she whispered to herself, he's just being kind. Don't read into it. But the warmth in her chest told her that part of her already had. In the days that followed, they both acted normal. They laughed again, shared small jokes, cooked together, and filled the house with the sound of living. But under every laugh and every look there was something unspoken, a delicate thread neither dared to cut. And though nothing wrong had happened, both of them knew they were standing near a line, one drawn not by rules, but by emotion. That was the beginning of the blur, the quiet moment where affection and confusion began to mix. Neither Eleanor nor Michael meant for it to happen. It was just the natural pull of two hearts trying to heal from the same grief, finding warmth where life had grown cold. And while neither of them said it aloud, both knew that their story had just changed course quietly, invisibly. And without warning, the morning began like any other quiet sunlight slipping through the curtains. the soft hum of birds outside and the smell of coffee filling the house. Eleanor sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by old photo boxes. She hadn't meant to open them, but something about the calm morning made her want to remember. The pictures were faded, the corners worn, but the faces still smiled as if time hadn't moved. Michael came downstairs, his hair still messy from sleep. When he saw her sitting there, he paused. The way she looked peaceful, focused, a hint of sadness in her eyes made him forget to speak for a second. "Morning," he said finally. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning. I was just cleaning these old boxes. I didn't realize how many memories were hidden in here." He joined her on the floor, picking up one of the photographs. It was of him and his father by the lake, both laughing, wet from jumping and fully clothed. "He used to take me fishing," Michael said, his voice low. "I remember how you always packed those sandwiches he loved." Eleanor laughed softly. "He hated how much mayonnaise I used, but he never said a word." Their laughter faded into silence. She reached for another photo, her wedding day. The dress, the smile, the joy, all looked like it belonged to someone else now. "I was so young," she murmured. "I didn't know how fast everything would change." Michael placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were beautiful," he said quietly. She turned her head, their eyes meeting. There was no hesitation in his gaze, just sincerity and warmth. She felt her heart skip, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. It had been years since anyone had looked at her like that with such gentle admiration. Trying to hide her emotion, she said softly, "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not? It's true." The air around them thickened with unspoken tension. For a long moment, neither of them looked away. Then she cleared her throat, trying to break the moment. "Would you help me put these in order? Maybe we can make an album." He nodded quickly. Sure, they spent the next hour sorting photos, but both of them felt distracted. Every time their hands brushed while reaching for the same picture, Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. Michael felt it too, but didn't understand why. There was no wrong intention, yet there was a strange closeness and emotional gravity pulling them together at one point. She reached for a photo at the same time he did, and their fingers lingered. She tried to move her hand away, but he didn't let go right away. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like seeing you lonely, Mom. You deserve happiness." Eleanor froze. The tenderness in his words hit her heart like a wave. "Michael," she said quietly, "some things we can't fix. Some things we just have to accept." He shook his head. "You gave up too soon. You think because Dad's gone, your life ended too. But it didn't. You're still here. You still have so much love to give." She looked at him, her throat tight. "And who would I give it to?" Their eyes met again, and this time neither of them looked away. The silence between them was charged, fragile, but deep. Then, without thinking, Michael reached for her hand. It was a simple gesture meant to comfort her. But when his fingers wrapped around hers, something changed. She didn't pull back immediately. She felt the warmth of his hand, the sincerity behind it, and the confusion it stirred in her. For a few seconds, time felt suspended. No future. Just that quiet connection neither could name. Then reality struck. She withdrew her hand gently, standing up. "You shouldn't do that," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." He said quickly, guilt flashing across his face. I hate seeing you sad. I didn't mean anything wrong." Eleanor turned away, trying to steady her breath. I know you didn't." But she also knew something inside her had shifted. Not in a way she wanted, but in a way she couldn't ignore. The loneliness that had lived in her heart for years had finally been noticed, and that was dangerous. Michael stood, unsure of what to do. "Mom, please don't be upset." She faced him, her expression soft but serious. "I'm not upset. I'm just confused. We're both hurting. And sometimes when people hurt, they start looking for comfort in the wrong places." He nodded slowly, shame washing over him. "You're right." For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence. Eleanor gathered the photos into a pile, her hands trembling slightly. Michael wanted to help but didn't move. He felt something heavy pressing on his chest, a mix of guilt, affection, and sorrow. After a moment, Eleanor said quietly, "You should take a walk. Clear your head." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe I should." When he left, the door closed softly behind him. Eleanor sat down again, her eyes falling on the wedding picture lying on the floor. Her younger self smiled back at her, a girl full of hope, standing beside the man she once loved with all her heart. Tears welled in her eyes. "What's happening to us?" she whispered. Outside, Michael walked aimlessly down the street. His thoughts raced, his emotions tangled. He hadn't meant to cross any line. He only wanted her to feel loved again. But now he realized that in trying to comfort her, he had awakened something he didn't understand. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper, emotional, and painful. When he returned later that evening, the atmosphere in the house had changed. Eleanor had lit a candle on the table and soft music played in the background. She looked calm, composed again. "You're back," she said quietly. "Yeah," he replied. "I just needed air." Ski gave a small nod. "Good. We both needed to breathe." "Yeah," he replied. "I just needed air." She gave a small nod. "Good. We both needed to breathe." They sat opposite each other, speaking little. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was cautious. They both knew a line had been crossed that couldn't be undone. But they also knew they still cared too deeply to let distance replace love. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Michael, we'll be okay. We just have to remember who we are to each other. Love doesn't always mean closeness, so sometimes means letting space exist." He nodded, his eyes soft with regret. "I understand." She smiled faintly. "Good, then let's start again." That night, as the candle burned low, both of them sat quietly, side by side, not speaking but thinking, feeling, healing. The house felt different now. Not broken, not whole, just human. And as Michael went to bed, he knew one thing clearly. He had crossed an emotional boundary he could never step over again. From that day forward, he would learn to love her the right way, deeply, respectfully. And from the distance that love sometimes demands, Eleanor, lying awake in her room, whispered to herself he didn't mean harm. He just needed warmth. So did I. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to cry, not from grief, but from release. The pain had finally found its voice, and so had the love that had always existed, pure, quiet, and strong enough to survive even this. The house had grown quieter after that night. Not empty, not cold, just still. Catherine moved through her days as if walking through soft fog, seeing everything, yet feeling detached from it. Every sound, every word, every corner of the house held memories she didn't know how to face. Andrew was still around, but something between them had shifted. There was a new silence, heavy, complicated, and unspoken. Catherine often stood by the window where the morning sun filtered through sheer curtains, warming her face. It reminded her of life before everything became tangled, before emotions got mixed with grief and confusion. She wished she could return to that simple comfort, to just be a mother, not a woman caught between love and guilt. But the heart doesn't always follow reason. And she was still trying to understand where things had gone wrong. Andrew, too, felt the change. He stayed home longer than usual, often avoiding his friends or colleagues. He didn't say much, but when he looked at his mother, his eyes carried the same uncertainty she felt. He was sorry, though he didn't have the words to say it. The line between comfort and confusion had blurred for both of them that night, when emotions had grown too raw, too close. Days turned into weeks, and one afternoon, Catherine received a letter. It was from her sister, living in Oregon. She hadn't visited in years, and the letter carried warmth and care, a reminder that life still moved outside her walls. Her sister invited her to spend some time there, to rest, to heal. Catherine hesitated, but something deep inside her said it was time. She needed distance, not from her son, but from the pain that had tied them too tightly together. That evening, she told Andrew about the trip. He looked startled at first, then nodded quietly. "Maybe it's good," he said softly. "You deserve some peace, Mom." His voice cracked slightly, and Catherine felt the ache of a mother's heart. Proud, sad, and tender all at once. She reached out and held his hand, a simple gesture that felt like forgiveness. There were no grand words, no dramatic apologies. Just an understanding that love doesn't disappear even when it gets tested the next morning. She packed her things, not much, just what she needed. Andrew helped her carry the bags to the car. The sky was clear, the air crisp. For a long moment, they stood there, neither wanting to move. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "And don't hide from life, Andrew. You have so much waiting for you." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will. I promise." As she drove away, the road stretched ahead like a clean page. The trees along the highway blurred into green waves. And for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe freely. She thought about how easy it is for people to cross emotional lines when grief and loneliness fill their hearts. But she also understood something deeper, that love in its truest form must respect boundaries. What they shared wasn't wrong in its feeling. It was wrong in how close pain had pushed them. In Oregon, Catherine found peace in small things again. Her sister's laughter, the smell of morning coffee, the sound of rain tapping on the porch roof, all of it reminded her that healing doesn't come in grand gestures, but in quiet acceptance. She started writing again, keeping a journal of her thoughts and feelings. Each page was a confession, a release. A way to let go of the heavy emotions that had trapped her. Back home, Andrew began to rebuild his own life. He started volunteering at a local shelter, meeting people whose struggles made him see his own pain differently. He found purpose in helping others heal. Sometimes he would sit alone on the porch, staring at the empty chair where his mother used to read. There was sadness, yes, but also gratitude. They had faced something painful and chosen to rise above it instead of letting it destroy them. Months passed before Catherine returned. When she stepped through the door, the house felt lighter. The air carried the scent of fresh flowers. Andrew had placed them on the table. "Well,